One of my favorite things about Norska is that they can easily build a variety of really thematic armies. If you just want to troll people, Throg and his frosty friends got you covered. If you want to unleash the mammoths, you can certainly make that work. But sometimes you just want to let the beast inside claw its way to the fore. The question we have to ask ourselves today is, who let the dogs out? Who? Who did this? A full army of wolves marches on the plains of Kolchan, and Clan Eshin will be there to greet them. Gunner runners, night runners, and a Skaven assassin, combining the ninjutsu arts of Nippon with the dread Bubonicus himself, Lord Skrolk, leading the charge for the Skaven. So I think I've only done a replay with a heavy werewolf core once before. If you guys remember that game between Slade and Morgengrat from a while back, Greenskins and Norska in a fight to the finish, that one was pretty crazy, but this one is going even heavier on the thematics. 2 Werekin, Maws of Savagery, 3 regular armored skin wolves, 2 ice wolves, a marauder ice wolf chariot, and 4 marauders, with a chieftain leading the horde. Now, what I really wish for Norska is a wolf jarl, some kind of generic skin wolf lord, and a caster lord as well. They're a well done faction for sure, but maybe lacking a bit in the lord diversity, which makes me kind of sad. And the Icehorn Marauders are kind of going to be the linchpin in that front line, but really it's the Werekin and the Skin Wolves that will be the majority of the killing power, and it's really going for a mobile strike force kind of build, one that can match up pretty well against Skaven given the right circumstances. My opponent today is a subscriber. I believe his YouTube handle is Insultan Sultan, and he's also going for some nice thematics here. 2 Night Runners, 3 Gutter Runners, a layered defense in-depth approach with Rat Ogres and Natty Bubo Sharpshooters, and all the way on the other flank, as we cross across this assassin in the middle of the army, the Teethbreaker Rattling Guns with their concealment bombs and overwhelming suppression. And they can be nasty to monstrous units. If they get close, they're going to get shredded in only a handful of seconds. And leading the army, of course, is Daddy Pestilence, Mr. Skrolkman, with Vermintide, Pestilent Birth, Plague Monk summons, Rod of Corruption to nuke enemies around him, and the Liber Bubonicus for clicking and deleting units. And he's got that assassin chilling in the back, ready to shank some fools. Rival Hide Talisman, minus 44 melee attack in an AoE, makes it pretty good in a duel, or when a bunch of guys are gooning up on your lord, and Assassin's Trophy to take enemy lords and hero stat lines and flush them down the toilet. So, it's Master Splinter and the Ninja Rats versus Team Jacob. This is why people like Warhammer, man. It's pretty cool. And at the beginning of this match, I was surprised to see how aggressive the Skaven were getting with their army. I'm not sure he realized how much speed I had on the field, but he rushed right for my deployment zone, which means there's less open ground between the 2 armies for his skirmishing. And immediately, the Maws of Savagery and Werekin will try and close the distance and start putting pressure on the Skaven right. Clan Eshin will respond in kind and begin retreating, but nothing in the front is very threatening, and it's a perfect opportunity to go right up the center and begin forcing those Clan Eshin units to retreat. The Gutter Runners, the Night Runners, they can all get run down by Frost Wolves. They will be able to close the gap, get that Frostbite mechanic imbued on them, slow them down, get the Marauder Chariots in, and really cause a lot of havoc in the front. Now, someone really needs to make an Air Jordan logo with that Skin Wolves animation. I mean, I don't have the Photoshop skills to do it, but they are dunking on the Skaven slaves in the vanguard. Vince Carter honey dip from the free throw line. That's putting an immense amount of pressure and tension on the front ranks, which is kind of the point. It's opening up a nice avenue of attack for the Maws and the Werekin, who are now going to go into the isolated Rat Ogres on the right flank and slam into them, send them on a flight with Good Boy Airways. I don't care how ridiculous that looks. That's amazing. That's like my favorite thing ever. Rat Ogre is going to get tossed aside, kind of like the Al Gorbel animation. Whenever they leave their feet and get hit in the middle of that attack, seems like even monstrous infantry can go flying. And they're going to. They got sent flying by the Skin Wolf charge there, and that's pretty much a perfect way to start this game. Maws of Savagery into the Rat Ogres, the Marauder Ice Wolf Chariots into the infantry, and forcing all the Eshin Gutter Runners to move backwards while they can't fire. And that's the thing about the Slinger units. They cannot fire on the run, they cannot fire when they are retreating. So the Marauder Ice Wolves continuing to just mow through all these infantry in the front ranks, but the Eshin Assassin and the Skaven Slave Spears have moved over to support the Rat Ogres, and Rival Hide Talisman, minus 44 melee attack going down. Those Skin Wolves have 5 melee attack while that debuff is active. That's pretty potent. pretty powerful, but the Maws of Savagery are still going to be able to get some kills there, and the Skin Wolves up the center, moving in with the Iceborne Marauders and causing a lot of carnage. Now the Chieftain is stripped down bare. He only has attack or die. That's to make him as cheap as possible so we can afford a bunch of wolves and a bunch of speed and mobility to hound those back lines. And the Teethbreaker Rattling Guns are firing in, and they're a huge issue. Look at that suppression. Trying to escape, not even particularly close to those Rattling Guns, and as the Natty Bubo Sharpshooters fire in as well. I mean, take a look at that. They're basically moving at infantry speed. They're not even charging in the direction of the Rattling Guns, and they're suppressed so heavily, they can barely escape. Going down to almost half HP from that, this flank needs to quickly wrap up their engagements and get into the range stuff. If they don't, it's going to be bad news bears for the Skin Wolves in the rear. And Rat Ogres are going to take Marauders to Pound Town. There's no question about it. They're going to smash them into oblivion, Hulk smash it up. But I'd argue this isn't really where they want to be. They want to be using their mass and their armor piercing to help deal with those Skin Wolves. And yes, they are large. They will lose to Skin Wolves in a 1v1 fight, but you get them surrounding Lord Skrulk, inundated by clan rats and slave rats, and you've got a very good chance to push those werewolves out and away from your army and force them into kind of disadvantageous positions. If you are just beating up on the infantry in the front, you're not really getting rid of the stuff that's the biggest threat to your army, and that is those Skin Wolves, who now have a good chance to get into the Teethbreakers because the Rat Ogres are fighting stuff all the way in the front. And the Werekin is going to close them down. He is going to get in and amongst those Rattling Guns, and each swipe of those huge paws will carve bloody chunks out of those ranks. A beautiful rear charge from the Marauder Ice Wolf Chariot. More Werekin and more Werewolves getting in on target, and immediately Teethbreaker Rattling Gun going to rout, and a free avenue of attack into the Jezzails as well. And you can see that all the range stuff has been pushed out of the Skaven box into the rear, where they can now get preyed on by all the fast movers. But that is a powerful range contingent. All those Gunner Runners, all the Night Runners together, with focus fire from them, they can easily deal with those Ice Wolves and kind of prevent them from closing down all the range stuff in the back. So, gotta be a little bit careful here, but Skrulk is in a horrible position now. His entire middle of his formation just got carved out, ripped out like a beating heart, and the werewolves have surrounded him, and they are gonna do their best to make sure that even though he's summoning a bunch of clan rats, even though he's summoning plague monks to help support him, that he can't escape. And if Skrulk goes down, that will be a big loss for Clan Eshin and the remaining Skaven troops. Lord Skrulk is melting though, surrounded by werewolves, and he will not be given a chance to escape. The Assassin and the Rat Ogres at this point would be better off retreating to the safety of the Eshin line, and it looks like those Ice Wolves, I set them forward a little bit too far. Yeah, that focus fire was pretty brutal. Two of them looked like they're about to be out of the fight. Rat Ogres have decided to charge in, trying desperately to save Lord Skrulk, but he's already shattered. There's nothing they can do, and now they're fighting a losing battle against Werekin and Werewolves, one they have no chance of winning. So they really should just retreat and form a kind of support line in the back of all those Eshin troops and give them a chance to fire in. And then, when there's no other option, when the werewolves actually get in and amongst all the Gunner Runners, that's the good time for the Rat Ogres to charge. But they kind of threw good money after bad, after they lost Skrulk. He was already shattered, he went in, and the Rat Ogres, they're just gonna end up dying. But you know what, maybe it wasn't the worst idea to throw them in, because the Eshin units do have a beautiful firing line coming in. And that focus fire, as we saw melting the Ice Wolves, it's beginning to melt the Werewolves also. And it's buying more time for them to fire in this blob that has devolved around the Skaven Assassin. So, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. Now, it does mean that in the later stages of the game, Rat Ogres won't be able to countercharge and tie down the Skin Wolves, but again, in a 1v1 fight, they'd have a hard time anyway. They bought as much time as they possibly could, but the Werekin and the Werewolves are free now, and they're going to be hunting down all these Gunner Runners and all these Night Runners, and there's actually a Skin Wolf armored unit coming in from the flank. They're retreated out that way, and now they're in and amongst. And they're going to get snared, but I think when they get in charge range, they can still close them down in melee anyway. And that's the game plan. Run them to the edge of the map, make sure there's always at least one fast mover on each Eshin unit, and then they can't get that focus fire, they can't retreat, and this is a weird position for Clan Eshin units to be in, because they're normally much faster than their prey. Not so here, they are the prey, and the Skin Wolves are coming for blood. They're going to get in amongst the Night Runners, start carving through them, slam them into the white line, and then push them all the way back. And here's the issue with skirmish builds. If you run out of all your melee troops, you have no way to kite effectively. At least not with the slinger variation. With the shurikens, for sure, but remember that Skinwolves have the regen, and they also have 20% physical resistance, which is a potent combination when you're talking about burst damage and surviving through it. And the thing about Gunner Runners is they're not really known for their burst damage. They want to chunk you down over time, slow you, snare you, poison you. They don't have amazing DPS that can just melt a unit from full to 0. Now, there are units on the Skaven roster that do that. The Assassin's about to get beaten up by this Werewolf, poor guy. There's absolutely no chance whatsoever. There are units that can do that for the Skaven. Poison Wing Globadiers, for example. They can melt a Skinwolf unit very quickly if they get a bunch of close-range volleys off. Rattling Guns, 2 or 3 of those together, we saw the Teethbreakers. I mean, they were mowing down those Skinwolves and slowed them tremendously. But of course, you can't allow them to get inundated and swarmed by Skinwolves or Ice Wolves because they'll die very quickly. They're very squishy. So this was a situation where burst damage would have been more advantageous for the Skaven. Gunner Runners, the Slinger variation can be very good in a lot of matchups, especially against low armor factions like Norska, but of course he had no idea I was be bringing a full wolf build with a ton of mobility and a ton of speed. And when you're faced with that with a bunch of Gunner Runner Slingers, you have no effective way to kite once the box breaks down and you lose all your melee infantry. You run into a situation where they run to the side of the map, but they can't fire because they don't have Parthian shot, and then they end up doing a whole lot of nothing. The Skinwolf Werkin will feast on their flesh, and that'll be the end of that. Poison Wind Globadiers, 2 or 3 of those on top of a Skinwolf, I mean, it will melt in seconds because they have magic damage, they side through the physical resistance, and they have that bonus for large. One thing you want to know about Poison Wind Globadiers, don't really fire from the furthest fire arc. You want to make sure they're up close. When they're about half distance from their max range, that is when units will disappear under a salvo of Poison Wind Globadier shots, and that's an effective way to use them. But yeah, the build itself, the idea was a good one, just unfortunate that I happened to bring a full werewolf-themed build because it had all the tools required to get into the rear, kill the rat ogres quickly, which is what armored Skinwolves are very good at doing, and once the rat ogres are done, the Gutter Runners really don't have a lot of chance to make a big impact on the battle. And you can see, those Ice Wolves, I mean, 200 kills on one of them. A couple of the Skinwolf armored variants got over 100. They munched up a lot of Skaven slaves, of course. I mean, the numbers are going to be inflated always when you're fighting against the Vermintide. But yeah, going for those full thematic builds is, I think, one of the best things about Total War Warhammer. The fact that you don't necessarily have to go for the full try-hard kind of army. You can go for something that's kind of off meta, that has a very clear theme binding it all together. And repping Team Jacob here was certainly very fun. Skinwolves are not a bad unit at all. Didn't quite use them as effectively as Morgengrat. Maybe didn't get them quite as much regen as I could have. Cycle charging with them, getting in and out of combat constantly is the best, most effective way to use them. Kind of did that there, but it is a unit that requires a lot of micromanagement, and that's the kind of army that I like using. A lot of speed, a lot of cycle charging, and when they get in, they rip and tear until it is done. Werewolves were an amazing addition to the Norscan roster. Was super glad to see when they finally got added in. I don't think anyone expected to see Norska when this trilogy got first announced, but they are an incredibly fun faction to play, and Skaven can deal with this kind of build. But in this situation, I just don't think they had the burst damage required to bring them all down in time. And once the box broke down, mobility got in, forced those Gunner Runners to move. And once they're moving, they're good as dead.